Okay, well, it's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Tammy Jacobowitz back to Torah in Motion, and Tammy is the director of the chair of the Tanakh department at SAR High School, and the founding director of Makom B'Siach at SAR, which is an adult education learning program for parents. It's a wonderful thing to have the parents and the children learn together. She teaches at Shiva Chovevei Torah, and it's a pleasure to welcome her back to Torah in Motion for Parshat Shmini. Vakasha, Dr. Tammy.
Wonderful. Okay, before I get started, everybody has access to the source sheet
I will post
from,
it in the chat box in a second, but yes, you
okay.
can also share. Yes.
Okay. What I'm planning to do for tonight, just to orient you, was I created a slideshow of the sources. So whatever you prefer, if you can follow along on the screen, and it will be source by source, or you can follow along in your own source sheet if you prefer to look away from the screen. If you have a Tanakh nearby, it won't hurt. I quoted excerpts, but you might want to, as we're going along, look at the wider section of the excerpts that I've chosen. Okay, it's so good to be back here. Jay often invites me, and I love saying yes to Vayikra, which is, I know, probably the hardest one to fill. But you may or may not know, I've been working for some time on a book on Vayikra to help parents learn Vayikra with their children. And, among the strategies that I've used in the book is the strategy of pulling out or really amplifying the suppressed narrative that lurks behind Sefer Vayikra. And I learned this strategy from the Midrash, from Midrash Vayikra Rabbah, which is what I studied for my doctorate. And it's just always thrilling for me to have an opportunity to share this strategy with a wider audience for people to get a sense of how Vayikra Rabbah brings Vayikra into a place that feels relevant and timely and supremely useful. And I hope that you will, by the end of tonight, have a sense of what it is that I mean by all this terminology. There are many sources on this source sheet. I often give classes in pedagogy, and thing number one is like, don't have 21 sources, but I have 21 sources tonight. Many of them are just brief stops on the train. So, but I will say in advance, if I don't get to all of the last sources, which is where the Midrashim are residing, please feel free to look at them over Shabbat with your families. Some of them we will do in depth, and some, as I said, we might not get a chance to really look at together. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Let's make sure that this works. Um, there it is, and I'm going into slideshow, and now, yeah, just thumbs up. This works. Everyone can see. Okay, thank you, Nikki. All right, Parshat Shmini, the high drama of Inauguration Day. And if we were in person and I were to say to you, the high drama of Inauguration Day, you probably would assume that I will be talking exclusively about the story of Nadav and Avihu, which is only one of two stories that show up on the surface of Sefer Vayikra. I'm not talking about Nadav and Avihu. I'm talking about the high drama prior to Nadav and Avihu. Now, what I want to share with you tonight, part one is called the picture perfect story. Part two is going to have the fissures and the cracks. I want to give a presentation of what precedes Inauguration Day. And by Inauguration Day, I don't mean anything related to any of our presidencies. Of course, I mean the eighth day after the 7 days of Miluim, of preparation, of practice before the opening day of the Mishkan. There's really two ways that we can understand or look at what this day represents. The first one I call the picture perfect story. And you have to bear with me because you already know the cracks and the fissures, but bear with me as I paint this picture perfect story leading up to the eighth day. The story really begins, if you will, at Yetziat Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, but we're going to begin with a pasuk from Parshat Truma. And if you see here in the bold, when the first time the Jewish people learn about the Mishkan and all of the materials that they will be hopefully donating to create this mikdash, the Torah says in Pasuk Chet, Hashem says to Moshe, speak to the people and tell them, Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. It's so famous we don't even need to read it. But the idea that they're being told in the desert to create a sacred space, a structure. And inside that structure, Hashem will be able to bring his Shekhinah in the midst of the people. If we had an hour, we could just talk about this pasuk and the impossibility of what it means to, what it sounds to us, and imagine what that would have felt like for people living in the desert. But there at the end of the section, Hashem continues and he says, in this Mishkan, ונועדתי לך שם ודיברתי איתך מעל הכפורת מבין שני, whoops, 1 minute, I have to move the faces out of the way. I can't see my text. How do I do that? Okay, מבין שני הקרובים אשר על ארון העדות את כל אשר אצווה אותך אל בני ישראל. So this Mishkan, this sanctuary, this place is going to be a place for communication, where God will show up there, as it were, in between the Kruvim, and it will be a place of communication between Hashem and the Jewish people. Now, the Ramban, very famous Ramban, which is useful. We talk about it when we want to understand the different ways of looking at the structure of Sefer Shmot. But here, the Ramban is talking about what he calls the Mishkan as a portable Har Sinai. I remember somebody said this at my Sheva Brachot. I thought they had made up that term, the Mishkan as a portable Har Sinai, but it really comes from Ramban. And when Ramban is describing the role and the place of the Mishkan in Sefer Shmot, he says like this. I'm reading from the top. Kasher diber Hashem im Yisrael panim bepanim aseret hadibrot, v'tziva otam al yodei Moshe k'tzat mitzvot, shehem kamo avot mitzvotah shel Torah, kasher hinhigu rabotenu im hagerim shebaim lehityahed, v'Yisrael kiblu alehem la'asot kol ma sheyetzavem al yado shel Moshe, v'karat imahem brit al kozeh, me'ata hinei heim lo la'am, V'hu lahem lelokim, kasher hitna imahem mitzchila. To paraphrase, Ramban says that the Mishkan is a natural conclusion. It flows out of the encounter at Sinai, where God spoke to the Jewish people panim bepanim, giving them the Aseret HaDibrot, which are only a brief nod to all the mitzvot that we will eventually receive, but he calls them the avot, the fathers, the larger categories of the mitzvot. The Jewish people have a brit with Hashem at Har Sinai, and then it was only right, it was only proper, after they've arrived at this relationship of Am and Elokim, you look at the bottom, V'hinei heim kadoshim ri'uyim. It's appropriate and right and correct. She'yeh behem mikdash lahashrot shchinato b'neihem. After this experience at Sinai, after the creation of this Brit relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people, they've achieved a status of Kedusha. And so having a place, having a meeting place between them and Hashem is the natural conclusion of this process. V'lachein tzivat techila al davar hamishkan, sheyeh lo bayit b'tocham mikudash lishmo, v'sham yedaber im Moshe. Et bnei Israel. In other words, the tzivoy, the command to have the Mishkan, comes when it does in Parshat Truma, says Ramban, because after they have left Mitzrayim and they have received the Torah, they're ready to have this place among them that can capture the experience of Kedusha and communication that they had at Har Sinai. In the bottom paragraph, he says, the Sod HaMishkan in the bold, Hu sheyeh hakavod asher shachan al Har Sinai shochen alav benistar. The secret of the Mishkan, says the Ramban, is that the kavod, the glory that resided asher shachan al Har Sinai, is now going to be with them. Again, here's where the portable Har Sinai shows up. The Mishkan is a way to capture the experience of Sinai, to extend the experience of Sinai, and to go with the Jewish people as they continue on their travels, eventually into Eretz Yisrael. Picture perfect. And we continue. In this vision, without rupture, when Moshe is given the commands to assemble the Mishkan, first to gather the materials. He's also told, V'ata hakreve lecha et Aharon achicha, v'ed banav ito mitoch b'nei Yisrael l'chahano li, Aharon, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, v'itamar, b'nei Aharon. Bring them close, Hashem says. Bring Aharon, your brother, and his sons from the midst of Bnei Israel. Make them the Kohanim for this place, which will be, as we said, the extension of our Sinai. They're all named, of course, as readers. When we see the words Nadav and Avihu, we know what their fate will be. But in the beginning, they were selected for this beautiful role to serve as the mediators, to be the Kohanim in this place. And of course, the next pasuk, Vasita bigdei kodesh la'aron achicha lechavod u'letiferet. I heard that pasuk spoken about a lot when it was the Parsha this year. There's a lot to say about clothing and how it helps us inhabit a sense of kavod and tiferet. This is part of the picture perfect story. Likewise, at the bottom, I have another pasuk. I'm not going to read it, but if you want to look at it later, this is the working of the Mishkan. We see a repetition, an echo of the idea of Kedusha and the idea of Shachanti b'toch b'nei Israel. All of this, Vahayiti lahem le'Elohim, all of this is about concretizing and bringing into a new extended form this covenantal relationship between God and the Jewish people that took place at Sinai. I guess I am reading it, and Pasuk Mem Vav, V'yad'u ki ani Hashem Elohehem asher hotzeti otam me'eretz Mitzrayim l'shochni betocham ani Hashem Elohehem. The whole purpose, right? The Mishkan will allow you to know that God is the God who took you out, and I took you out in order to reside among you, ani Hashem Elohehem. A few more pieces to this first description. In the creation of the Mishkan, again, a popular pasuk for the Parshiot of Truma and Tetzaveh, Vayovohu ha'anashim al hanashim kol nadiv leiv heviu chachvanezem. When they were assembling the Mishkan, everybody joined in. They all worked together. The first collective enterprise of the Jewish people, where everybody was involved, everybody did their share. I just finished teaching Migdal Bavel to my students in SAR High School, which was really the first collective enterprise, which went terribly wrong. There too, there was cooperation. Here, however, there's individuals working together, kol nadiv leiv, so many alternating between collective and individuals. They work together to build this place which would enable them to feel the closeness of Hashem within their machaneh. There were no exceptions. There were no people in the story who said, I'd rather not. There's nobody here like later who didn't do what was needed to be done with the man. Not for the Mishkan. Everybody was all in. And since I mentioned Breshit, we also have in the creation of the Mishkan and the story of the creation of the Mishkan many references to Breshit. This is well known, but when the end of Sefer Shemot, when the pasuk says, "Vatechel kol avodat Mishkan o hamoed, vayasu b'nei Yisrael kachol asher tiva Hashem et Moshe kenasu." Vatechel, of course, is an echo of Vayichal, Vayichulu. Hashem in the creation, the completion of the creation of the world, we have echoes here of the creation here. Now with the Mishkan, it's a parallel kind of world and universe. And everybody did. Everybody, the artisans, the donators, B'Tzalel, everything went according to plan. Everything was good and right. It's like if we're invoking Breshit, Hashem would have looked out and said, and saw Vayar Elokim Kitov. Everything was where it needed to be. And one last.
Asu is la'asot. Bara Elokim la'asot.
That's right. That's right. That's another important reference. Thank you. Right. And right here also as well, in this last source that's in the picture perfect version, Kachol asher tziva Hashem et Moshe kenasu b'nei Yisrael kol ha'avodah vayar Moshe et kol ha'melacha. There's the reference that I was looking for. I forgot I put it. Right. Vayar Elokim kitov vayar Moshe et kol melacha v'hinei asu ota kasher tziva Hashem kenasu vayavarech otam Moshe. To recap before we move to the fissures, this is a story of everybody working together, the Jewish people working to build a house for Hashem so they can live with Hashem in their midst. It's a natural extension of the miraculous and nation forming experiences that they've had up until this point. And so when we get to the ending of the story, when the Anan fills the Mishkan, that makes so much sense. That was the point. Everything was done right. And we skip ahead to Parshat Shmini, our Parsha, and Vayhi Bayom Shmini. Everyone is there. Moshe is there. Aaron is there. And the Zikanim are there. Everything has gone according to plan. But there's another story. There's another backstory that leads to the same moment of Yom HaShmini, which has many, as I say, cracks and fissures, but eventually atonement, eventually a way to redeem and make whole those cracks and fissures. So what do I mean by cracks and fissures? The first crack you may have noticed and may have learned about or spoken about at the end of Sefer Shmot. I conveniently didn't put it on the slide in the first version, but after Moshe finishes and we have the Shoresh of Vayechal, the next pasuk is Velo Yachol Moshe Lavo El Ohel Moed Ki Shachan Alav Ha'anan Uchvod Hashem Malei Et HaMishkan. If you've never noticed this before, it's sort of startling. If you have noticed it before, I wish I understood how you resolved it, but it's this moment of crisis almost, that the Mishkan does what it's supposed to do. Hashem is residing in the Mishkan.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do not. You're doing the Hebrew, and then you're not translating all the time. I apologize because I'm losing you now.
Okay, thank you so much for telling me. Thank you so much for telling me.
I'm sorry.
No, not at all. Do you see where we are now in the source on the screen?
Well, it's all in Hebrew. I don't speak Hebrew, so.
Okay, I'll speak more slowly and I'll translate.
No, I'm going to get my, just tell me where in the Chumash I have to go.
Okay, so we're in Shmot Mem. We're in Exodus chapter 40, and it's verse 35 through 38.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So as I was saying, the crisis that, okay. The crisis moment is when the Mishkan comes together and the glory of God resides in the Mishkan. But then Moshe, as it says in Pasuk Lamed Hey, V'lo Yachol Moshe, he was not able to actually enter the Ohel Moed because it was filled with Hashem's glory. It's a very confusing Pasuk. I thought the purpose was for Hashem's glory to be in the Ohel Moed, for the tent of meeting to be the place for Hashem's glory to reside, but there is an impasse. And Moshe in this verse is not able to enter the Ohel Moed. In fact, the book of Exodus ends at this impasse. It's not resolved until the very beginning of the next Sefer. In the opening pasuk of Parshat Vayikra, when Hashem calls to Moshe and he speaks to him from the Ohel Moed, and then clearly, although the text doesn't tell us how it gets resolved, but clearly it is resolved. But here is our first crack in the picture perfect story. The Mishkan, which was, as we said, assembled like this gigantic, Lego set by Moshe, everything just the way it was supposed to be done. But then there is a break, there is a crack. The Mishkan cannot be completed in its original function for some time.
Sorry to interrupt you. You translated the word lo yachol, was not able. I will translate it, was not allowed.
By whom?
By the situation.
Okay. Should we take questions or now? I think Jay asked me to wait.
I just wanted.
Thank you. I mean, not able to, or you said, tell me again your translation.
Was not allowed.
Was not allowed. So the impasse, it's even stronger the way that you're translating it. It's not about his own desire or his own, motive, but he wasn't allowed to, right? So the crisis is even stronger. And again, how does it get resolved? It gets resolved when God calls to him, and then he's able to enter and communicate. The second crack and fissure in this beautiful story is the one that I alluded to in the very beginning, and that is the story that happens after the very beginning of the opening of our parasha. It's in the middle of the parasha, and this is the devastating story of Aharon's two sons, Nadav and Avihu, who, when nobody was looking, it seems, in the middle of this momentous moment of everybody watching the Mishkan come into its full state, they slip away, they fill their fire pans, they all make an offering that was not commanded to them, and a fire comes out and consumes them. So much to talk about in that story, so much to unpack. For now, just notice it's, of course, a devastating moment in this beautiful story, and it chips away at what we presented in the beginning. Is it really that glorious? Now, finally, the most important fissure, of course, is the one I've been avoiding mentioning the whole time, and that is the story of the golden calf. And if you've read that Ramban that I referenced in the beginning, the reason why Ramban seems to argue so passionately for the Mishkan as the intentional, logical conclusion to the experience of Matan Torah is because, as you know, the book of Exodus, the story of the Mishkan is interrupted by this, I'll use that word again, devastating, bewildering story of the golden calf. It's smack in the middle of the story that I described as seamless. It's not seamless. It happens in the middle. It's incorporated, it's swallowed in to the story of the Mishkan, but it needs to be addressed. And I will add that my teacher, Dr. Rudita Zorenberg, who in the last couple of years wrote a beautiful book about Vayikra. If you don't have it yet, if you're an Rudita Zorenberg fan, I see Ruth is nodding. It's a beautiful book. And her main thesis, which she carries throughout the whole of the book, is that the story of the golden calf is lurking behind everything in Vayikra. It's the story, the continuing traumatic presence of this story, which lingers and lingers and lingers. And so much of Vayikra is set up as a way to deal with what happened. For tonight, I want to point out that in this story of Chet HaEgel, which we know well, which we've thought about a lot, which we still don't understand, I want to point out the presence of a real mystery or an unexplained or loose end that is left in this story, which will be the theme for tonight, and that is what happens to Aharon. How does Aharon understand his role after the Chet HaEgel? So if you look with me for a moment, and I will try to translate and follow along with me if you can, in the bold, of course, after Moshe comes down and he sees what he sees and he throws down the luchot, that's in Pasuk Yotet, and then he takes the egel and he burns it and he feeds the people right from the ash. In Pasuk Chaf Aleph, Vayomer Moshe el Aharon, Moshe said to Aharon, Me asa lecha ha'am hazeh, ki heveta alav chata'a gdola. What has this people done to you that you have brought upon it this terrible fate? Now, even that question is very interesting. On the one hand, it sounds extremely compassionate. What did this nation do to you? But the second part sounds a bit accusatory because you have brought upon them this chet, right? Again, to invoke Breshit, sometimes questions are rhetorical. Sometimes, like when God says Ayeka to Adam in the Garden of Eden, sometimes the questions are informational. You decide, what kind of question is this that Moshe asks? And then Aharon responds in the next pasuk, Vayomer Aharon, Al yichar af Adoni, ata yadata et ha'am, ki berahu. Aaron says, don't be angry at me, my master. You know that this nation is Birah, I'm afraid to translate now, is in a state of evil, has this at their core. You know them. And then he reports, honestly, Vayomru li, he says, they said to me, Aseh lanu Elokim asher yalchu lefanenu, ki ze Moshe ha'ish asher ha'elanu me'eretz Mitzrayim, lo yadanu mehayalo, and continues in the next pasuk, more or less word for word, the way that it was narrated earlier in the parak. And skipping to pasuk Chavhei, Bayar Moshe ta'am ki paruahu, ki pera'o aharon l'shimtza bekamehem. Even if you don't know the Hebrew, you can see the word play, parua, pera'o. Moshe saw the people that they were wild because Aharon had done that to them. Again, the doubling of the language. I mentioned this in my book for kids. After Moshe opens with that question and Aharon gives his answer, Moshe doesn't ask any follow-up questions. He doesn't say, so tell me, what were you thinking? So tell me, how did you handle that? So tell me, what was that like for you? Instead, he sees what he sees, and he sees that the people really need to be dealt with, but he also sees that Aharon seems to have a real responsibility in what went on. And finally, at the end of the section, after the people are stricken with a plague, even the pasuk says, and look all the way at the bottom, the number got dropped, but it's Lamed Hey, Vayigof Hashem et ha'am al asher asu et ha'egel asher asa Aharon. The people made the egel, Aharon made the egel. Who exactly is responsible is not made clear either by the conversation between Moshe and Aharon, and it's not left clear, it's left open, doubly responsible, even in the narrator in Pasuk Lamed Hey. So if you just go in your mind for a minute and ask yourself, how did Aharon understand his status after the Chet HaEgel? It's really hard. This is it. This is the whole conversation. Never comes back up again. Whole bunch of opinions in the commentators, and I'm sure in our heads. Was he unwilling, but perhaps nevertheless the mastermind? How did he understand his role? But after the conversation with Moshe, how did he know if he was forgiven? How did he know if he could carry on in his role? Could Moshe trust him again? Could he trust himself? Would the people trust him? And finally, before we get to the redemptive part, if you see another fissure in the text that you're familiar with, that after the Chet HaEgel, even though Moshe was able to turn God around from his desperate state of anger and desire to eliminate the people, and there was reconciliation, and there was a second Luchot, and there was a restoration of the covenantal relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people, still things were not the same. And if you see here these, I think, really arresting psukim of what happened after the Chet HaEgel, after Moshe came back down, the pasuk says that Moshe, pasuk Zayin, yikach et ha'ohel v'nata lo michutz lamachaneh harchek min hamachaneh v'kar'a lo ohel moed v'haya kol mevakesh Hashem yetzei alo hamoed asher michutz lamachaneh. Moshe took a tent, and he put it quite outside of where everybody else was living, far, the verse says, harchek min hamachaneh, and he called it the Ohel Moed, and anybody who wanted to speak to Hashem would go to the Ohel Moed michutz lamachaneh. V'haya ketzeit Moshe el ha'ohel, yakumu kol ha'am v'nitzvu ish petach ohelo, v'hibitu acharei Moshe ad bo'o ha'ohela. I find these arresting, this image of the whole people sort of getting up in the morning, watching Moshe leave his personal tent and go out to the Ohel Moed. Nobody's talking. Nobody's following him. They're following him with their eyes. Things are not what they were. The relationship between Hashem, the Jewish people, and Moshe, that very delicate but vital triangle that we've been tracing ever since Moshe entered the scene at the very beginning of Sefer Shmot. Now, after the Chet HaEgel, in the midst of the busyness of creating the Mishkan in the Parshiot, we have Moshe off to the side. We have the people watching this. things are not as picture perfect as we imagined. Okay, before I move on to the redemptive piece, any questions or comments? I'm happy to take one or two before we move forward. Okay, we're good? Is this clear? Yes, okay. So what I want to show you in the remaining time is given this backdrop of Moshe receding, Aharon unsure of his status, the people unsure of their status, the people unsure how to look at Aharon. Aharon in this role, which we know he was appointed to be the Kohen Gadol, but really Aharon, look what he brought us into. With all of this uncertainty, we need to think again about what was happening during the creation of the Mishkan, what was happening during the 7 days of Miluim, and what was happening on this opening day, on the 8th day. How did this process bring all the players, Moshe, Aharon, and the people, to a place of reconciliation, recognition, and ability to move forward? Now, I mentioned the Midrash, and we're going to be looking at some Midrashim, but before we look at the Midrashim, you might notice in the Psukim on the screen, I have a lot of bolded expressions, and those are the expressions that the Midrash picks up on, and we will see them inside. But we can probably already anticipate some of the ideas that the Midrash will be bringing forward to argue that Yom HaShmini, this day of inauguration, was designed to be a day where all the players could feel a sense of certainty and quiet and understanding of their roles. So to look with me at the Psukim. First of all, the first Pasuk. Vayhi bayom hashmini, kara Moshe la'aharon ulevanav uleziknei Yisrael. He calls to them, similar to the calling that we said at the very beginning of Sefer Vayikra, which was Hashem's invitation to Moshe to come and really hear and communicate with him in the midst of the Mishkan. Moshe calls in front of everybody Aharon and his children, and the Zikanim as the elders, as being given kavod, as some say, or as witnesses right at the front seat in the dais to be able to watch this scene. And before we go even further, remember that the last time that Aharon was in front of the whole people, when he was in a public place, was at the Chet HaEgel. Moshe wasn't there. The Zikanim weren't there. Aharon was alone. But now, on this day, it's choreographed so that Aharon is in front of the people, but he also has the support of Moshe and the Zikanim. And then he says to Aharon, Kach lecha egel ben bakar lechatat v'ayeh leolat mimim v'hakrev lifnei Hashem. You don't need to be a midrashist to understand what you're going to say about that egel. Again, in this resituating, you might be thinking in your head about the Rambam, where the Rambam says, how does a person achieve complete tshuva? Be in the same situation, make the opposite choice, make the right choice. So this is being engineered on some level, it seems, for Aharon in front of the people, and now he takes an egel, but this is not an egel that will be used avodah zarah or for ambiguous worship. This is for worship for Hashem, for opening the Mishkan. And then in Pasuk Gimel, Ve'al b'nei Yisrael tedaber lemor k'chu se'irizim lechatat. Even if we don't finish the Pasuk, look what Moshe's doing. He's saying to Aharon, it's your job, Aharon, to go and speak to the people. He's giving him the words. He's giving him the command, giving him the instructions. They're looking at you. You're in this role. You're rightfully in this role. You must tell the people what they need to bring in order for Hashem to show up properly in this space. If we look again at Pasuk Vav, Vayomer Moshe zeh hadavar asher tiva Hashem ta'asu, ve'ira aleichem kavod Hashem. After telling them, right, what korban he should bring, what korban they should bring, and they do it, then Moshe says, this is the thing that Hashem said that you should do. And then the kavod, the glory will be displayed for you, allaying their anxieties. You've done the right thing. You've brought the right korbanot. Zeh hadavar. This is the thing that you need to bring, and the Hashem's kavod will come. We will come back to some of the other bolts, but just skip with me for the end of the section. After they have brought, and Aharon's sons get in on the action, they bring all their korbanot, they collect the blood, very choreographed. They've been practicing it for 7 days. It's on display in front of the people. But if you go to the very end of the section, right at Pasuk Chafbet, all the korbanot have been offered. Vayisa Aharon et yadav el ha'am, vayevarchem, vayered me'asot hachatat ve'ha'olah ve'hashlamim. Aharon lifted his hands towards the people. Of course, now we know this as Birkat Kohanim. And he blessed them, and he came down from doing all of those korbanot. Okay. And then Pasuk Gimel, Vayavo Moshe ve'Aharon el Ohel Moed, Vayetzu, Vayivrachu et ha'am, Vayerak kvod Hashem el kol ha'am. Moshe and Aharon go into the Ohel Moed, then they go out of the Ohel Moed, and then they bless God, and then the kvod Hashem was seen by all the people, and finally, on Pasuk Daled, the fire comes and consumes all the korbanot. That's what they were waiting for. And at the end of the Pasuk, when they see and they rejoice, they fall on their faces. What I'm trying to point out here in the end is a few things that are strange and a few things that make sense. What's strange is that there seems to be a pause, just as there was a pause at the end of Sefer Shmot when everything had been done. Here, all the korbanot had been offered, just as they had practiced, and still, like, what were they doing? They're biding their time, going in, going out, one set of brachot, another set of brachot, right? The pause that's happening there, what is that about? Why does that happen? And also what seems to make sense is this notion of Moshe and Aaron again in front of the people. And perhaps, I'm saying something a little contradictory, perhaps the pause is part of the plan. Now let me show you how the Midrash amplifies these psukim that we just looked at, some of the hints that we uncovered, to really show that what was happening on this day, none of this was accidental. All of it was designed to help, as we said, all the players recognize that they had been forgiven. First of all, Rashi says famously what we, this is not the one I referred to, sorry, Kravel HaMizbeach, come to the Mizbeach, Shahaya Aharon Bosh Veyarei Lageshet. Amar lo Moshe, Lama ata bosh? Lecha nivcharta. When Moshe tells Aharon, Aaron, come to the Mizbeach. Why does he have to tell him, come to the Mizbeach? Again, haven't they been practicing that? Doesn't he know what to do? Rashi says it implies that Aharon was actually embarrassed and afraid to come close. And Moshe said to him, why are you afraid? This is why you were chosen. This is a very interesting Rashi, because Rashi is, again, finding in, first of all, a pasuk, a set of words which just seem to be saying something ordinary. The fact that they're there imply a drama. There is a moment that's not written out specifically, but it's hinted at. Number two, this Rashi is very important because it's helping us understand some of Aharon's underlying anxieties and some of Moshe's role in trying to bring that to fruition. Remember in your mind that fraught conversation that we looked at quickly between Moshe and Aharon. Moshe was part of why Aharon wasn't sure. Again, he didn't ask follow-up questions. Again, he didn't tell him at the end, my brother, it's going to be okay. I'm going to make sure that you're off the hook. He never heard those words. So Moshe, at this moment in this inauguration scene, he's the one who's gently prodding Aharon to be able to see, Lekach ata nivcharta, no, you're rightful. You should be here. Rashi says some very interesting things, and there's two Rashis, one after the other. I'm going to read them, but I'll translate and then we'll discuss.
Excuse me?
Sure.
I thought the word Bosh also reminded me of Boshesh from Moshe.
Oh, nice. Nice. that they saw that Moshe was Boshesh, and here Aharon is
So
Bosh.
Bosh is embarrassed, but I
Right.
mean that Rashi chose that word, ties it also back to the ego.
Very, very associative, Debbie. I love it. Yeah.
It also reminds me of Velohit Poshashu, because there is an opinion that the Bnei Aaron were naked.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Back to Breshit. Okay. So Rashi here says on that pasuk that is at the end of the section, where we notice that Moshe and Aaron are going back in after Aaron had just blessed the people. Rashi asks, Lama nichnasu? Why are they going in? There's a lot in that question. Why are they going in and then coming out? Why are they going in at all? Why is there a second set of brachot? He gives one answer and then he gives another answer. Skip to the second line, davar acher. Kevan shera'a Aharon shekarvu kol hakorbanot. After Aharon saw that all the korbanot had been given, v'nasu kol ha'maasim, and all the actions had been done, v'lo yarda shchina liYisrael. And remember that pause. Something wasn't right. Something wasn't happening. The Yerakvot Hashem had not yet happened, and the fire didn't appear yet. How did Aaron understand it? Haya mitzta'er ve'omer. He was distraught, and he said to himself, Yodea ani, sheka'as hakadosh baruch hu alai, ubishvili lo yarda shchina liYisrael. He says, I know that God is angry with me, and it's on my account that the Shekhinah has not come on Yisrael. It's an astounding statement, and if you've studied Midrashim on Breshit, we keep mentioning Breshit, a very similar story is told about Adam Harishon, when he saw darkness for the first time, and he thought the world was coming to an end on account of him. I think this is a very deep psychological insight, which I try to tell my children all the time. When you see someone is upset, don't assume it's because of you. We all do that. We think we're the one. Often, it's something outside of you. But here, Aharon, right, in the words of Rashi, he perceives that what's happening for the whole Jewish people is on account of him. And this is actually it. In the worst version of Rashi, according to Aharon, this whole scene was set up so that he'd get to the point of being able to see, I'm out. Because of me, this can't happen, and I need to leave in order for there to be this relationship, this resumed relationship between God and the Jewish people. But in Rashi, Moshe answers, and he says, Amar lo Moshe, Moshe achi. Amar lo leMoshe, sorry. He says to Moshe, Moshe achi, kach asita li shenichnas nichnasti v'nitbayashti. Did you do this on purpose, Moshe? Like, why'd you do this? Why'd you bring me to this place so I would be right up in front of the people? It's really so sad the more I explain it. And I would have this moment of full-on shame in front of the people. Miyad nichnas Moshe imo ubikshu rachamim veyarda shchina liYisrael. According to Rashi, that's why they go in. After this conversation, they go in, and they go in and they daven. And when they daven, it seems like, right, something gets turned around and the Shekhinah comes down. This Rashi leaves open the possibility that were it not for that tefillah, things would have been different. Again, a lot to unpack between the relationship between Moshe and Aharon, what this might have meant for the future of the Jewish people. But it's that moment of pause that Rashi is picking up on. Something was not right. Aharon perceived it as it being about him. And then resolution comes and the Shekhinah descends. The next Rashi, Vayetzu vayivrachu et ha'am, right? The very next phrase. Rashi gives the other side of the coin. Amru v'hi noam Hashem Elokeinu aleinu yihi ratzon shetishre Shekhinah b'maaseh yedechem. What did they bless the people? Not birchat kohanim, as we now know it. What they blessed the people was, God should bring his Shekhinah on you. God should be happy with what you have done. Again, addressing the pause. It hasn't happened yet. This bracha was about the completion of what the Mishkan was all about. Continues Rashi. Lefi shekol shivat yemei hamiluim, sheha'emido Moshe lamishkan, v'shimesh bo, uperko b'chol yom lo sharta bo shchina. All 7 days of the Miluim, when they were practicing, when they were assembling and disassembling, and they were going through all the motions, it was practice. There was no Shechina. V'hayu Yisrael nichlamim ve'omrim LaMoshe, and the Jewish people who were watching. Now this is not Aharon about himself. This is the Jewish people about themselves. They said to Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu, Kol hatorach shetarachnu shetishre shchina beinenu v'neda shenitkaper lanu avon ha'egel. Right? You hear it? There's not even a question. It's like, how could this be? We've worked so hard. We've poured our hearts and soul into the building of this Mishkan, and it's not going to happen. We're not going to know what's the it. Neda shenitkaper lanu avon ha'egel. They're desperate to have evidence. They're desperate to know that what they did and what how Hashem responded, that they've moved on and they don't know it. They've been working and assembling and doing and donating and not knowing, and working through that anxiety and not knowing. And at this moment, when all the korbanot have been offered, it's not even the practice days anymore, and they're not seeing the Shekhinah, they're so nervous, and Moshe's bracha is in response to that anxiety.
I have a problem with that drash, because in Cheta Egel, after Moshe goes to Aaron and tells him what you said before, Lama eveta tachata'a azola'a, he goes to the people. Moshe himself goes to the people and he said to them, Chata'a gdola asitem. After the 300 people are killed, Moshe goes to them. So I'm surprised.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm surprised that the Midrash who says that the people who went to Moshe with an openness, hey, we worked so hard and we don't know yet if our chet or there was kapara. I'm a bit. You understand my problem?
I think so, but I think that what you're referencing when Moshe speaks to them, he is speaking to them about their chet. He's not yet speaking about their kapara. In other words, right? They know he staves off the worst by davening to Hashem and Hashem not wiping them out. You could say, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but you could say, okay, why would the Jewish people think that they weren't forgiven, right? Especially if you don't follow like the Rambam and you think the whole idea of the Mishkan was to repair the relationship, and the fact that they were given the commands to build it and they've been building it, that should have been enough for them. And now everything is happening.
I will give you, if a child has done something wrong and the parents catch him by him doing wrong, will he go back and tell the parents, are you happy with me now? No. You're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. So that's exactly, I'm surprised that the Midrash brings that it says, Kol hatorach shetarachnu shetishre shchina beinenu v'neda shenitkaper lanu avon ha'egel. This 99% of Am Yisrael that were in this moment, they were bystanders.
Yeah.
They were bystanders. They should not have allowed that. So they really made a big sin. So I'm surprised of that. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay, Chaim. No, I don't think the question is whether or not they thought there was a sin. The question is, where are we now, right? And where have we moved to? And it hasn't been clear to them. So this moment, according to the Midrash, for them is a moment of really they're watching, they're waiting, they're listening, and they're wondering, are we going to have evidence that Hashem has not forgotten, right? Not forgotten, but has forgiven us enough to rehabilitate the relationship and to move forward with us. So the pause, according to Rashi, we have two things going on. It's like everybody's holding their breath. Aharon's holding his breath, and the people are holding their breath. And at the end, that last bold, Aharon achi kedai v'chashuv mimeni, she'al yedei korbanota ve'avodato tishre shchina bachem v'tid'u shehamakom bachar bo. According to Rashi, what Moshe is also doing, he's alleviating Aharon's concerns, he's alleviating the people's concerns about themselves, and he's also presenting them Aharon and saying, he's the one. He's going to be the one. Hashem has chosen him. In front of your eyes, you all will see that through his agency, Hashem has chosen him, and he is the rightful leader for this moment. Okay, I'm nervous about opening up more midrashim because we have 10 minutes left, but let me do one more. Okay, let me show you one more. They're so good and they're so rich, and they pick up on all of these threads that we've been noticing throughout. So let's see. I'm skipping the Rashi, the famous Rashi, that the Egel is there as kapara for the Egel. Okay. This is an incredible midrash. This is a midrash that is in Vayikra Rabbah. And it's only a section of it that I have here, believe it or not, but we're only going to read the bottom. It's a midrash that is responding to a pasuk that says, you have you love tzedek, and I'm afraid I don't see it right now. Okay, never mind. While I find that in a minute. The midrash is talking about different personalities, and this section is about Aharon, and there are many different interpretations of his role in Egel Zahav and how it relates to the Mishkan. So look at the bottom with me for a moment, before the bold, where it says Davar Acher. Davar Acher, another idea. Vayar Aharon. Ma Ra'ah. When it says that Aharon saw, what did he actually see? Amar Aharon, im heim bonin heinoto, hasirchon nitla behen. Mutav sheyitzaleh hasirchon bi v'lo b'Yisrael. This seeing of Aharon is taking place in the story of the actual golden calf. And what the Midrash says, what does it mean? He saw, he understood. He said, if they build it on their own, then they're going to be held responsible for their rebellion. It's better that the rebellion will be placed on me and not on Yisrael. Majorly took one for the team. Rabbi Abba bar Yudan, b'shem Rabbi Abba, he offers a mashal, a parable. Leben melachim, to a prince, shenitzka eli ba'alav velakach et hasayif lachtoch et aviv. I've used the word startling and devastating. All those words are happening here in this story. A prince who gets really arrogant, and he takes it sounds Shakespearean, right? And he takes a sword to hurt his father, cut him down, kill him, unclear. Amarlo Padgogo, his pedagogue, his private tutor, the one who was responsible for his moral education, says to him, oh, sweetie, don't tire yourself out. Give me that sword and I will do it. Heitzitz hamelech alav amar lo, yodea ani lehechan haita kavanatcha. The king gets wind of this. Maybe he overhears the conversation. Maybe he finds out about it and he says, I understand what you're doing. I know what your kavanah is, what your intention is. Mutav shiyitaleh hasirchon becha v'lo bibni. I know that you were trying to take one on yourself so that my son wouldn't be responsible. Here comes some Aramaic. Chayecha, I swear to you, min palatin didi late at zaya umotar patori at achil. He says to him, in reward for this unbelievable thing you just took on, you're never leaving my palace. That doesn't sound like a reward, but I think it means you will always get the benefits of the palace. You will always eat from my table, and you will get all kinds of stipends for the rest of your life. Says the Midrash, I'm running out of time. This is like Aharon. Aharon did the same thing, and Hashem's response was the same way. How so? Umin hamigdash lo yetzeh. We find out later in Vayikra that when a Kohen has a loss, unless it's specific relatives, he can't leave the mikdash. That's like not leaving the palace. And eating from the plate, from the table, that's like all the gifts that the Kohen eats, all the sustenance. And the 24 stipends, those are like the 24 gifts of kahuna that Aharon and his sons were given. You see what's going on here. In the final lines, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Aharon. Hashem said to Aharon, Ahavta tzedek, you loved to do justice. What does that mean? Ahavta letzadek et banai. You really tried very hard to allow my children to be seen in the best possible light. V'saneta milachayavan. You didn't want them to be held responsible. Al kain mishochecha Elokim Elokecha. Amar lo chayecha shemikol shivto shel Levi lo nivchar lekehuna gdola ela ata. Kach et Aharon ve'et banav. What's happening here? The Midrash is picking up on that pasuk from our section. Bring your brother and bring Aaron and his sons. Again, doesn't seem so significant. Says the Midrash, no, it's very significant. In fact, what Hashem is saying to Aharon in this moment is, not only is it okay for you to be the Kohen, despite what happened, because of your behavior at the Egel Hazav, I want you to know that I see the strengths in what you did, and I see the compassion in what you did, and I see that you are the appropriate person, the only person to be in this job of Kohen Gadol. It's an astounding midrash, and it continues in this thread of what I've been developing tonight, that despite all the cracks and fissures, despite all the things that happened that don't allow us to only see the continuous, seamless love relationship between God and the Jewish people, the day of Yom HaShmini and the whole process of the Miluim and even the building of the Mishkan, all of it was designed for the people to know, to experience, to understand that they have been forgiven, that Aharon has been forgiven, and that they have an opportunity now to continue to rehabilitate their relationship with Hashem. I'm going to stop the share. I can see all your faces. I hope that got clearer as we moved along. Thank you to everybody who told me that I was not translating enough. And I really appreciate your attention. I wish you a beautiful Shabbat.
Thank
you. Any questions just before we go? Maybe.
Thank you. Yes, Kayach.
Thank you,
So
Debbie.
is the Ohel Moed now the same as the Mishkan?
That's a great question.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a great question. Yes, that's what it appears to be. Yes. Yes.
You said at the end that Aaron was forgiven, but in the second midrash, he didn't need to be forgiven because God considered him positively for having caused the sin, and by causing the sin, he protected the Bnei Israel.
That's correct. So according to that particular midrashic tradition, you are right. There is no forgiveness that's necessary. He maybe needed to understand that for himself, right? Because he may have felt guilty. When does this message come through? It only comes through now at the Miluim. So he only understands now through the Kach that he has been rightfully chosen. But you are correct. There was no kapara needed for Aharon according to that midrash.
Okay.
Just a second, Tammy. Beautiful, beautiful construction and development. Thank you. Lovely presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tammy. I look forward to having you back. And okay, tomorrow I'll be back to my regular Siddur class at 9:15. We took a sort of a 3-week Pesach learning about Pesach. I happen to be at the Techazena Einenu. We're in the middle of the Shmon Esrei, which I think is a very appropriate topic, coincidentally or not, for the week before Yom Ha'atzmaut. Techazena Einenu V'shuv Chalet Tziyun B'Rachamim. So that will be our topic tomorrow. Of course, Sunday Rabbi Liebtag will be back. I'm sure you got all the all the spring classes, but what I didn't put on because we didn't know about it yet was Rachel Sharansky Danziger is going to be doing a series. She just wrote a book on new prayers for all the new holidays in Israel. It's called Az Nashir, between silence and song. So she asked for Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaTzmaut, etc., etc. So we missed Yom HaShoah, but she's going to be starting on Tuesday. It's going to be actually 2:15. It's an unusual time for us, but that's what works for her. 2:15 Eastern time, 3 Tuesdays. So that so I think it is posted on the website, but it wasn't in your email. But anyway, just register for all the classes. You'll get information about everything that we're doing. And okay, any questions, comments? Thank you very much. Please invite a friend to come to one of our many shirim. Of course, Monday we'll be starting 2 new classes. Tamar Weissman will be starting a 15-part series on the Shvatim, and the information is on the website, going through Sheva in their ancestral homeland. Anybody who's in our class on Hanukkah and Modi'in saw her amazing interpretation of how Modi'in ties into Hanukkah. She said that's what she's going to be doing for each one of the Shvatim, how the Shevet ties into the inheritance they got in the land of Israel. And the Chama Berish Goldman is starting a 3-part series on issues on Kavod HaBriyot, human dignity. That'll be 11 and 1 on Monday. And then I said Tuesday, of course, Rachel Sharansky. And then next week, Barry Kleinberg will be starting a series on unorthodox, I forget what he called it, unorthodox thinkers, though, orthodox, thinkers who are not normally considered within the Orthodox fold, some of their thought. I don't know if it was Emil Fackenheim in this one, but whatever, that'll be a 6-part series. So those are our new series. And of course, Mark Shapiro, all our regular classes will be having Rabbi Schulman and Natty Helfgott and myself and Menachem Leibtag and Benny Gesundheit. So we have lots to keep you busy and lots to tell your friends to come to, and want to wish everybody well. And look forward to hearing good things. And we should be zochad legeula shlema from Pesach to Yom Ha'atzmaut and everything. Okay, Tammy, you're listening to all the PR for Torah Motion. You can let everybody in Teaneck know, and you can spread the word. That's what everybody should do. You guys are our best PR team. So if you like what, please let people know. All right, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, everybody. We look forward to learning with you soon. Have a good night. And I will check, even though I normally don't care, I have to check what's going on in the Leaf game. I don't know anybody. I even looked anybody. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. But it's the first time in 27 years that the Toronto Maple Leafs have won the first 2 games in the playoffs. That's how good their history is. So we'll see. There, people in Toronto are starting to get excited. Maybe this is the year. So I don't know. They're playing Game 3 tonight. Okay, a little bit of from the serious to the when you need a break. Okay, everybody. Marty, are you checking? Are you still a Leaf fan? By the way, you still like the Leafs? No, you gave up on the Leafs. What do you look? The Rangers, the Islanders? Okay. Anyways, all right. Lila Tov, everybody. I think you're muted, but okay. Lila Tov. Thank you.